The room is warm, but the air feels cold. It is late in the evening on September 14th, 1942, inside the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. Thick concrete walls press in from all sides. Maps cover the tables, red and blue arrows cutting across the Soviet Union like open wounds. Outside, rain taps against pine trees. Inside, a silence stretches too long. You can almost feel the tension sitting on every chair. A German general has just finished speaking. His voice was calm, careful, and realistic. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. He said the supply lines are breaking. He said the troops are exhausted. He said the plan will not work. And now all eyes turn toward one man. Adolf Hitler does not shout. He does not argue. He simply stares. In this room, that stare is more dangerous than any scream. In the early years of the war, this scene would have ended differently. And back in 1939 and 1940, Hitler still listened, at least sometimes. The generals of the Wehrmacht were professionals trained in staff colleges, men who thought in terms of logistics, weather, rail capacity, and time. They spoke a language of limits. Hitler spoke a language of will. At first, those two languages coexisted. Poland fell in weeks. France collapsed in 6. Each victory made Hitler more confident, and each success taught him a dangerous lesson. When he ignored cautious advice and still won, he began to believe caution itself was weakness. By the summer of 1941, that belief hardened into policy. On June 22nd, at 3:15 in the morning, Operation Barbarossa began along a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. German columns rolled forward under clear skies. At first, everything seemed to confirm Hitler's instincts. The Soviet units collapsed, cities fell, prisoners came in by the hundreds of thousands. But inside headquarters, the reports told a more complex story. Fuel consumption was higher than planned. Roads were turning to dust. Rail gauges did not match. Soviet resistance was not ending. It was reorganizing. One man who saw this clearly was Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff. Halder was not dramatic. He was methodical, precise, almost dry. His daily war diary recorded distances, losses, delays, and morale. By August 1941, his notes showed concern. By September, they showed alarm. He warned that the Soviet Union was not on the brink of collapse. He warned that winter was coming, and Germany was not ready. Each time Halder spoke, he chose his words carefully. Each time, Hitler listened less. The punishment did not come all at once. At first, it was subtle. Invitations to key meetings stopped arriving. Decisions were made without consulting him. Orders bypassed the General Staff and went directly to field commanders. Hitler began issuing detailed tactical instructions himself, sometimes down to the level of battalions. This was not just control, it was a message. Realistic assessments were no longer guidance, they were obstacles. Other generals noticed and adjusted. Some stayed silent. Some reshaped their reports to sound more optimistic. A few refused. Those men would pay the highest price. In December 1941, after the Soviet counteroffensive outside Moscow shattered German lines in temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius, the crisis reached Berlin. Generals requested permission to pull back to shorter, defensible positions. Retreat was a military necessity, but Hitler saw it as betrayal. On December 19, 1941, Hitler dismissed Field Marshal Walter von Brauchitsch as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and took the position himself. Walter von Brauchitsch was not fired for incompetence alone. He was fired because he could not convince Hitler that reality mattered more than orders. The message to the officer corps was unmistakable. Professional judgment would not protect you. Loyalty would. Around the same time, one of Germany's most brilliant armoured commanders was removed from command. Heinz Guderian, the architect of Blitzkrieg, argued for flexible defence and withdrawal to save his forces. He did not shout. He did not conspire. He simply explained what the situation demanded. Hitler responded with rage. In December 1941, Guderian was relieved of command and sent into enforced retirement. The man who had helped win the war in the West was sidelined for telling the truth in the East. These punishments created fear, but they also created something more dangerous. They created an echo chamber. Reports moving up the chain of command became softer, brighter, and less honest. Losses were minimized. Problems were delayed. Hope replaced analysis. Hitler began to believe that the absence of bad news meant success. In reality, it meant silence. By 1942, this system was fully formed. Nowhere was it more deadly than at Stalingrad. In the summer, German forces drove south toward the Volga and the Caucasus oil fields. The plan was ambitious, stretched thin across vast distances. Officers on the ground saw the risk immediately. The Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, was advancing into a city that would consume men and ammunition at a terrifying rate. Supply lines ran hundreds of kilometers across exposed steppe. Soviet reserves were gathering on the flanks. Warnings came in waves. Army group commanders reported weakness along the Don River. Staff officers calculated supply requirements that could not be met. When the Soviet counter-offensive began on November the 19th, 1942, the trap closed quickly. Paulus reported the encirclement within hours. He requested permission to break out while it was still possible. Hitler refused. He promised resupply by air. He promised relief forces. Both promises were fantasies. The generals who insisted otherwise were punished in different ways. Some were removed. Some were ignored. Some were humiliated in front of others. Hitler's method was psychological as much as administrative. He did not just silence dissent. He made an example of it. Officers learned that being right could end a career faster than being wrong. One of the clearest cases was Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, commander of Army Group Center during the drive on Moscow. Fedor von Bock warned repeatedly about overstretched forces and exhausted troops. He requested pauses to regroup. Hitler interpreted this as lack of faith. In December 1941, Bock was dismissed. Officially, it was for health reasons. Everyone knew better. By removing men like Bock, Hitler reshaped the leadership of the German army. Promotions increasingly went to those who echoed his views or avoided contradiction. Independent thinkers were sidelined. Loyalists advanced. Yet the result was a command structure that looked strong on paper but was brittle in reality. Even intelligence suffered. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of military intelligence, delivered assessments that contradicted Hitler's assumptions about enemy strength and intentions. Wilhelm Canaris warned about Allied industrial power and Soviet resilience. Hitler distrusted him deeply. Canaris was marginalized, his reports questioned, his influence reduced. Intelligence that did not flatter the leader was treated as sabotage. This climate changed how decisions were made at every level. A division commander hesitated before reporting fuel shortages. A corps commander delayed admitting losses. An army commander framed retreat as temporary repositioning. Each small distortion fed the larger illusion at the top. By the time reality broke through, it arrived as catastrophe. Yet Hitler believed this system proved his strength. In his mind, generals who warned of limits were weak men infected by doubt. He saw himself as the only one with the will to see things through. When setbacks came, he blamed execution, not concept. Someone must have failed him. Someone must be punished. The punishment was not always dismissal. Sometimes it was worse. It was being kept in command with impossible orders and no authority to change them. Paulus at Stalingrad was promoted to Field Marshal on January 30th, 1943, the day before the surrender. No German field marshal had ever surrendered before. The message was clear. Death was expected. Survival was disgrace. By early 1943, the pattern was complete. Honest assessments led to removal. Optimistic obedience led to survival. The German army still fought hard, still showed tactical skill, but its strategic mind was broken. The men who could see the whole board were gone or silent. One by one, reality was punished out of the room. And yet, inside that concrete bunker in East Prussia, Hitler still believed the problem was not truth itself, but the men who spoke it. As the war turned against him, his response was not reflection. It was control. Tighter orders, harsher punishments, fewer voices. The system that silenced warnings now ensured that disaster would come without notice. By the spring of 1943, the silence around Hitler was no longer accidental. It was engineered. You can almost feel it in the corridors of the Wolf's Lair, where boots echo a little longer than they should, and conversations drop to whispers the moment a door opens. And men who once argued openly over maps now choose every word as if it might be their last. The lesson has been learned. Reality is dangerous. Optimism is safe. After Stalingrad, the German army is bleeding, but Hitler refuses to accept the scale of the disaster. Nearly 300,000 men are gone, captured or dead. Yet in conferences, he speaks of sacrifice and destiny. Generals who attempt to explain the loss in military terms are cut off or stared into silence. One staff officer later recalls that meetings feel less like planning sessions and more like trials, where the accused never knows what crime he has committed. In March 1943, the focus shifts to Kursk. The Eastern Front has stabilized, but only just. Soviet forces are building massive defensive belts, layered with mines, anti-tank guns, and reserves. German reconnaissance aircraft report trench systems stretching for kilometres. Intelligence officers present aerial photos and estimates showing that the Red Army is ready and waiting. The message is clear. A surprise attack is impossible. Delay only helps the enemy. Several senior officers, including Erich von Manstein, argue for a flexible defence instead of a massive offensive. Manstein is careful, respectful, and precise. He explains that time favours the Soviets, not Germany. Hitler listens, nods, then ignores him. The decision to attack is already made. When doubts continue, they are treated not as professional warnings, but as personal resistance. The punishment here is not immediate dismissal. It is something more corrosive. Hitler delays the operation again and again, waiting for new weapons to arrive, particularly the Panther and Tiger tanks. When those tanks break down in large numbers during the opening days of the battle in July 1943, Hitler explodes. Responsibility flows downward. Commanders are blamed for failures they warned about months earlier. Careers stall. Trust evaporates. After Kursk fails, the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front is lost forever. The generals know it. Hitler refuses to say it. Instead, he tightens his grip. Orders now include strict no-retreat clauses. Positions are to be held to the last man, regardless of tactical sense. Officers who pull back to save their units are relieved of command. Some are court-martialed, others are sent into obscurity. One of the most tragic examples comes in Italy. After the Allied landings at Salerno in September 1943, German commanders recognise the danger of encirclement. They request freedom of manoeuvre to trade space for time. Hitler's response is suspicion. He believes retreat encourages defeatism. When Field Marshal Albert Kesselring manages to conduct a fighting withdrawal despite restrictions, it is success born of quiet defiance rather than permission. Lesser commanders are not so lucky. As the war continues, Hitler's punishments become increasingly personal. He berates generals in front of subordinates. He questions their courage, their loyalty, even their honour. The atmosphere becomes toxic. Younger officers learn quickly that advancement comes not from insight, but from alignment. Staff work shifts from honest assessment to careful presentation. Numbers are adjusted, language is softened, and truth is wrapped in optimism and hope that someone else will deliver the bad news. In July 1944, the system finally produces open rebellion. The assassination attempt on July 20th fails, but its aftermath reshapes the officer corps forever. Hitler no longer distinguishes between honest professionals and conspirators. Suspicion falls on everyone. Hundreds of officers are arrested, dismissed, or executed. Even those with no connection to the plot feel the consequences. The last remnants of independent military thought are crushed under fear. After this point, realistic assessments almost completely vanish from Hitler's presence. Frontline commanders know the situation is hopeless. Fuel is scarce. Ammunition is rationed. Replacements are teenagers and old men. Allied bombers dominate the skies. As Soviet armies are rolling west with overwhelming force. Yet reports reaching Hitler speak of holding actions, local successes, and temporary setbacks. In December 1944, Hitler launches the Ardennes offensive. The plan demands speed, surprise, and fuel Germany does not have. Several generals quietly believe it is impossible. They say so carefully, indirectly, trying not to provoke anger. Hitler interprets hesitation as sabotage. When the offensive stalls in the snow-covered forests of Belgium, blame again flows downward. Commanders are replaced mid-battle. Units are ordered forward without support. By early 1945, the punishment for realism is total exclusion. Hitler operates in a fantasy world of phantom armies and imaginary reserves. On April 22nd, in his Berlin bunker, he finally explodes when confronted with the truth that Steiner's counterattack does not exist. The generals in the room stand frozen. Some stare at the floor. Others look at the maps, as if the paper might save them. Even then, Hitler does not apologize. He does not reflect. He condemns the army, the generals, the nation itself. In his mind, the problem was never his refusal to listen. It was the failure of others to believe hard enough. The cost of this culture is measured not only in lost battles, but in lost chances. Chances to withdraw, to regroup, to shorten the front, to save lives. Each time a general chose honesty, he risked humiliation or removal. Each time he chose silence, he became part of the machine grinding forward into ruin. When the war ends, surviving officers will speak quietly among themselves. And many will admit they knew the truth long before the end. They saw it in the numbers, the weather reports, the fuel logs, the casualty lists. But they also saw what happened to men who spoke too clearly. Hitler did not just punish generals for delivering realistic assessments. He taught an entire system to fear reality itself, and that fear, more than any enemy tank or bomber, ensured Germany's defeat. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.